You have things like DEI, right? And you have people that they'll defend DEI on principle, but they don't exactly understand the implementation of DEI, right? Because, okay, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, right? And everyone just on a base level will be like, okay, well, this is a good thing, right? Why would people be against this? Why would people, would there be a negative connotation to DEI, right? And again, the principle isn't the problem, right? Because on principle, these things will just happen over time, like diversity, equity. Well, diversity in particular will just happen, right? And if everyone's goals align, it's very inclusive. And, people will find the things that they like, say, in video games. And that's pretty equitable because some people may like the story, some people may like the gameplay, some people will like the character design, and all these things come together to make a truly equitable product. Even if one's lacking, right? Or even if you don't care for one, well, you'll have the other. And in older games, yeah, you had certain games that didn't have had like a goofy story, like, okay, Half Life Black Mesa. It's like, oh, the scientists found something, and therefore they sent the military to wipe out the people working there. But then they sent the Black Ops to wipe out them, the military. And then when it all said and done, they just nuked the facility. Spoilers, by the way. But it's like things like these, like the DEI as a concept will just happen, right? This has been happening before I was born, like Star Trek and older shows, right? And they weren't popular because they were niche. And when things were niche in entertainment, you had the soul, right? And now, because companies would rather suck up ESG, have tax breaks, suck up government grants, cover their ass, you see this reflecting in the product. And usually I try to have my own synapsis, synopsis of things as opposed to just looking at what everybody else looks at, right? Because I think if you use ideology to defend a bad product, right, then that does innumerable damage to the ideology, whatever it is, right? You can inject whatever ideology you want. That does innumerable damage to the ideology. And there's been so many situations with this happening because you have people that just uplift themselves. And I think there are three groups of people, right? You have the foot soldiers that just, people that don't look further into things. They just see the DEI. And they're like, oh yeah, that's good. Well, obviously anyone that looks against that is bad. And usually oversimplifications are used in these situations because it's, again, people that don't really have a reference to how the rest of the world act or how things outside their universities act, but they're taught by universities to act a specific way, to interact with the world a specific way. So, and they impose these things on just online mainly because people in reality don't actually act like that, right? But so that's one group, right? The second group are, people that they don't exactly have a lot of power, but they have influence. And when you have influence, you can profligate your ideology, even if it's year after year. And these happens in like colleges, right? These happen in like, I don't know, certain group when people come together to profligate ideology, right? And Nowadays it was woke ideology, but before then there was the other ideologies, right? It's just, the USSR has completely, you know, created ways on how to fuck with people, right? And I think all this like, do I think it's communism? No, but I do think it's this new version of socialism, right? That no one exactly wants to explain, but they want to impose it, and that's where the second group of people come in, right? That they're like the prophets, right? They profligate the ideology, right? And then you have the highest group of people of this, and they actually use ideology to uplift themselves and uplift the people around them, right? And you have Black Lives Matter for example. They've built mansions, used money to spent millions of dollars into hiring the people, making the people around them look good, but then they go bankrupt, right? And we don't know. No one knows what they've actually done, right? And I believe movements like these should exist, but I don't believe they should become organizations where the idea is profit, because then that becomes the incentive, right? Not entirely to have change, right? Not entirely to bring to light issues and social issues that anyone will agree with, right? Like no one wants, the police state, right, to be armed and oppress the citizens, right? Like what's happening with the UK, people being rounded the fuck up and thrown in prison for like memes on Facebook, right? We've seen this happen to like with your own eyes to like 10 like 2 years ago, like even this year it has happened, and anyone can agree with that. And I believe the George Bush era has scared people into thinking this way, right? That if you don't support this thing, well then you're a this, you're a that. Like if you don't support the war in Vietnam, you're a communist, you're anti-capitalist, and this has absolutely traumatized people because now the woke crowd use literally the exact same tactic, right? It's an inversion, it's a mockery. It's kind of like, yeah, you have Christ, but then you have the Antichrist, which is just an inversion and a mockery of the thing, right? I'm not conflating these two, right? Though, wow. The woke were pretty, like, anti-religion to an extent. That's why it doesn't exactly bode well with, say, the Hispanic or the black community, because they're pretty religious. But I mean, Americans, like, we don't really think so far into this ideas, right? And again, the culmination of all these things in like companies and corporations is in organizations is the DEI initiative, right? And if you look right here, it's like I typed in companies stepping away from DEI, and to Google's credit, Google is a pitch engine. It's not exactly a search engine, and you can take all these from a grain of salt. You can look up all these. Ford Motor Company, one of the companies on the front lines of a culture war, according to 10 News, whatever. Harley Davidson, the motorcycle company, issues a memo in August to ensure the employee training would be absent of socially motivated content. Lowe's home improvement retailer that has announced changes to its DEI initiatives. So what you see is they're not entirely, they're using flowery language. I think in some cases they're just moving DEI somewhere else, right? Or, they're making one of the first companies to roll back DEI initiatives. Yeah, because people hear the initiatives, right? And people hear the DEI, and it's just became the new slur because they can't hide this. Like people know when it's an initiative. It is actions to impose diversity, right? Again, diversity is something that happens naturally. Always when you try to force something and impose it, there's always negative backlash. Like in California when they tried to change the minimum wage, and they're like, okay, we'll do it. So what do the companies do? Well, they fire about 2/3 of their employees and have machines, right? And again, minimum wage is something that raises on its own naturally because if, say, Burger King wants to be competitive, right? Because McDonald's is paying, I don't know, $10 an hour, and Burger King's only paying $9.50 an hour. Like it's going to try to be competitive and kind of raise it. And these are things. It's something that forever crawls, and it might not reach as much as you want in the near future. But I mean, that's the thing with things happening naturally. You have to allow it to. You can't force things to happen because people find loopholes. People try to cheat the system. People try to save money. People use initiatives to uplift themselves and their ideology and the people around them that think the same way. Microsoft made headlines for its changes in its DEI staffing through some outlets mischaracterized the news. Companies like Zoom and Snap, companies that have cut DEI jobs. Yeah, so see, these people are being fired and have the fucking hiccups. This happens every time. Hell. For some reason, these changes include fear of liability, political backlash, pressure from conservative lawmakers and activists, and a desire to avoid alienating half of their consumers. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games where, yeah, okay, they had to play it to cover their ass at one point, but they shouldn't have. Again, companies are not moral entities, right? So I don't treat a company with the same way I treat like my mother. Right? Like I don't treat a company the same way I treat my brother. So always assume that when they use these things, it's to suck up some like tax cuts or ESG money or other shareholder money, and this is what's happening in gaming, right? But I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna see what other companies are either changing or ousting. And again, other than cutting jobs, right? I don't think it's something going away. I'll follow suit. They said they'll no longer provide data to nonprofit corporate equity index, a traditional respected barometer for which companies best meet the needs of LGBTQ plus community. Like, why you need to do this? Like, you're a company. The point is to make money. And again, if you don't identify as USD, like they don't care. They don't care. And I don't think the activists are entirely dumb, right? You gotta understand proximity. Like I get this all the time. People are like, okay, so gays for Palestine, that's like chickens for McDonald's. And it's like, no, again, proximity. They're utilizing whatever tactic, whatever groups, whatever people, even though they're not in proximity with each other, to go against, again, this manifestation of evil that's in their head. That's America, right? And they think this because they don't travel the world. They don't go to other places on the planet. They don't see oppression in other places on the planet, so they have no reference. They're told how to act. They're told how to interact with the world. They're told how to go about, these things, and they are seeking to impose these things on you. So, and again, another question I ask is, oh, well, what do you mean by woke? And to end off, like, by woke, I think it is the intent, right? And I'm going to use Dragon Age Veilguard as an example because obviously the intent of Dragon Age Veilguard is to push this strange, like small, fringe American ideology that doesn't translate to the rest of the world. And when the leaks happened, people like they actively tried to shut down leaks. They actively, tried to pick and choose who to give their game to. And I think last time I checked, it had like 50,000 buyers. That's still bad numbers for a multi-billion-dollar AAA game or company, a multi-million to hundreds of millions of dollars put into making the game. But I mean, it definitely sold better than like Concord and Dustborn games that effectively weren't games, but people bought them. The small group of people. So again, what is woke? Well, it is the intent. If you intend on adding things such as diversity, equity, inclusion to push and you choose to change the story in a way that doesn't make sense. You change characters in a way that they don't act right. You swap characters. You push ideology. And again, I really need to hammer the ideology. Like, no one in fucking Asia will understand anything that Dragon Age Veilguard is talking about, right? And I doubt in China they have any of that because, I mean, you're not gonna like, how other cultures treat the LGBT. You're gonna have a problem with the way they do, especially in games. Like, if there's even a whiff of it in games, China will be like, "You cannot sell that here. Get this shit out of our fucking face. Who the fuck do you think you are, goofy American?" But and again, that's why if you don't identify as USD, they don't really care. And I think again, people understand this, but for some reason, it's a tactic that's being used regardless and imposed regardless. And it's very, very well. I would say it's odd. Like, this is usually how ideologies are pushed and imposed, right? Through media, through entertainment, through colleges, and through institutions and even companies, right? This is a tactic as old, it's a very old tactic. I don't know if it's as old as time itself, right? Because we don't really didn't have the technology in year 2 of the Lord. But we absolutely do have technology now to spread information. That's why companies and, the government wants to use social media as a tool. And in some situations, they gladly, like, bend the knee. Like, Facebook gladly bends the knee, right? And companies utilize the advertisements to actively change companies and social media sites' perception towards what they want, right? So this is just my synopsis of DEI, my synopsis of woke up until now. Again, what is woke? It is the intent of adding things in, changing story, changing character, changing the world, changing the lore to meet the ideology of a small, fringe, radical group of people. And in games, they don't even really play the games, right? They just want to push the ideology. They want to erect demons in their head and then impose them on everyone else around them. Right, that's what they want to do. And it's a tactic that if you see, I mean, I'll call it out when I see it, and I don't really care who does it, right? It's like, you're not my fucking mother. The fuck you trying to impose your shit on me? And complete fucking strangers that you know they don't care for this, but you want to do it anyway, right? But anyway, that's all I really gotta say about this. Peace.